Hello and welcome to the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar and I have Raschell with me here. Thank you so much for joining me, Raschell. A mutual friend introduced Raschell and I with the idea that we would hit it off and be, that Raschell would be a good guest on the show, and lo and behold, I feel it's really true, given what Raschell's shared with me about her work before we got started recording. So I'm going to let Raschell please introduce yourself and tell us about your work and how that's connected to your womb-centered healing process.
Thank you so much, Sama. My name is Raschell Harlingten, and I am a mom. I am a transformational coach and author. And this journey, I would say, started for me probably about 12, 13 years ago, when I decided to walk away from what I thought was a great relationship at the time, but ended up being a very emotionally damaging, with 2 children in tow. And it helped me understand a lot about myself and supporting both of my children, and understanding that what we are taught as children doesn't always serve us as we grow as adults, and we take a lot of that emotional baggage along with us that can be very damaging, and then we end up building a family and having one. We end up placing it on them, not knowing any better. So I work with moms, single moms, entrepreneurs, and lately I've actually been working a lot with teenagers to really support them, because they are so intuitive, so awake, so aligned with what's going on, but they're so confused because society gives them so many mixed messages. So yeah, I'm very excited to have this conversation with you, because I think we align beautifully with so much of the womb wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so I'm curious about this decision that you made to leave this relationship. What was sort of the defining moment where this was happening, you were leaving?
I think, I mean, as women, well, at least for myself, I'm going to only speak for myself. I try to, as I can, make the best and always try to build the family and keep the family together. But I think the defining moment, after several years of emotional abuse, and then it became a little bit physical towards myself and my oldest son, is my mother came to visit. And I remember sitting on the bed with my daughter, who was just 3 months at the time, and my son, and my mother looking at me and saying to me, "You're not the Raschell anymore. That light in your eyes is gone." And that was like, whew, that was really intense to hear from my mother. Yeah. Because it's like it kind of hits you, and you're kind of like, wow, that's really, what do I do now, right? So I think that was, for me, was a very, very significant turning point. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of when I decided, okay, I'm not going to continue down this road with myself and these 2 children in the same way. I'm going to just break this, mm-hmm. even though I had no idea how. And that first step, instead of just dipping my foot in the pool, I just jumped right off the cliff and left. I sold my family home, and I went and lived in an apartment with my 2 children. And that became the slow progression of understanding more about myself, helping my children heal, going through the trials and tribulations of trying to make it work for them. But I think the biggest jump after that was when I quit my job and I got involved with animals and started working with animals, one of my first entrepreneurial businesses. That in itself started to heal all 3 of us, because I would bring my children out of school if they had a bad day, and they would work with me during the day. And I honestly believe that it was source, energy, divine, plan for me to go through that and then heal, because it showed me how, even though all this trials and tribulations had happened, I was healing myself, and I was breaking this sort of generation of, because it was, of course, in my children's father's family, and I wanted to stop it there and then. So, and I noticed a huge change in my children as I started to involve them in bringing them out with the animals. Started to make them calmer and happier. And then I noticed that my son was starting to have a lot of health issues. So at that time, I got involved, or I reached out to a community of friends who put me in touch with an amazing Russian homeopathic doctor. And that was the journey that has, I think, saved us all, because I learned so much about the medicine. I learned how to help my children through working with the medicine, rather than putting them on drugs or, giving them pills and just masking it over. So that was sort of the big defining. I know I went a little bit bigger there, but yeah.
Well, this, first of all, there's so much womb wisdom in the story that you're sharing. Our mothers can be such a support for us throughout our lives. And I'm so glad that your mother, who was holding a vision of who you are and could recognize when that gleam in your eye was dimming. I know there's a story about that in my ancestry where my great-grandmother's mother came on a boat all the way from Brazil through New York, wouldn't let the people at Ellis Island search her trunk. She's just this big woman. She sat down on her trunk. She didn't understand English. She didn't know what they were trying to do, and she wouldn't let them look through her trunk. And then got on a train, I guess, across the country and stayed for a year and convinced my great-grandmother to leave her abusive husband, my great-grandfather, with 2 young children. My grandmother was 5 years old and my grand aunt was 12 years old. They crawled out the window in the middle of the night. This is back when, she was in danger of being told to get back to her husband and stop fussing about it, right? But her brother, luckily, listened to her and sheltered her because she went and said, he's going to kill us. So this is a very familiar story of having the mother say, you don't need to live like this. In fact, please don't live like this, right? Something's dying in you in this circumstance. And having that, our mothers hold that vision for us, that motherly love of compassionate care, and help us out of those situations is so powerful. So I'm glad that we could share that story. And then this sense of mothering your children through the recovery, because it wasn't just you that was probably affected by the emotional abuse in your marriage. I'm imagining that they were affected by it too, and that your son's illnesses may have been related to all of that. And then finding homeopathy, I'm so glad that we get to talk about that, because that's an approach to healing that I feel is very feminine, or arising from womb wisdom, which is very holistic and treats the whole person, similar to the way that a womb develops a new baby. It doesn't do one part at a time. It nourishes the whole being simultaneously. And so approaches to medicine that do that, I call those womb-centered healing practices. And so homeopathy is very much like that. And then in addition, homeopathy, in my understanding, is about the more dilute the influence is, the more gentle, or like the less physical influence is, the more potent it actually is, the deeper the medicine actually is. And I use those principles in my healing practices and my apprenticeship. I always tell my apprentices, this is a homeopathic program. You don't have to do the practices every day. You can do one practice and spend the whole rest of the program integrating and processing whatever that one practice revealed to you. And so I'm curious to hear about your experience with homeopathy and how it helped you and your son and perhaps even your daughter, I don't know, to heal from particularly the traumatic aspects and how they influenced your health.
Like the first was, of course, myself, and I had to heal both the traumatic pregnancies. There was not really any support, so there was a lot of trauma personally, and so she started with me, and it was very emotional. It was healing sort of all of the emotions, not feeling good about myself, going through both of those pregnancies, and we would meet probably every couple of months. She would go through how I was feeling, what I was craving, because homeopathy really is about your symptoms, as you know, and so it's what you're craving: hot, cold, do you feel tired, do you want a soft bed, a hard bed, do you like bright light, dark light, like all those things really hone in on the medicine. And so she started with me with the medicine, and as I slowly started to feel better, my energy started to come up. I wasn't so angry inside because I was holding all that anger. I started bringing my son in because he was developing eczema, he was developing some other skin issues, and I said, this is what's going on. And so she started working with him, so it was alternating. My daughter was still very young. However, through the course of probably 10 years, we would go see her. My son would work on some of the medicines, and he had a lot of anger as well. So the two of us had to really take the medicines. Some were heavy doses, like 200 CH, which is a very heavy dose, or we would take ones which are diluted with water, and you spin the energy and you drink it over time. It's like you said, it's like a slow process where you're taking a little bit at a time, and it's slowly releasing everything that needs to go. And I started getting really good with it because I could then start to hone in on what was going on. And a lot of times, once you feel into the medicine, you can start to see the symptoms in yourself and your children, and you're able to actually prescribe your own. So I started off with 3 little vials, and now I probably have a whole suitcase full of them. And based on what the symptoms are, is what I sort of say, okay, sometimes I'm right on the money, and then sometimes I'm not. And it's really to do with the symptoms. Over the years, I've supported my daughter when she had ear infections or trauma. I would give her medicine, and we would work that way. It would help her a lot with stress, anxiety. Same with my son. They will actually come to me now. They won't go and buy cough medicine. They'll come to me and say, okay, this is what's going on, Mom. I feel like this, and I'll listen, and then I'll say, okay, I think it's this, and I'll give them a list, and they'll say, yeah, that's what I'm feeling. And usually 9 times out of 10, if it's right on the money, within 24 hours, the symptoms drop and they start to heal. So it was a long journey, but I would not have it any other way, because it healed the whole body. It affected both of us, and to this day I still use it. So yeah.
And it sounds like it's healing not just the physical body, but the emotional body and spirit as well, which so much of trauma, whether it's birth trauma or being born to a mother who's experiencing trauma, is very traumatizing for the child too. And that sets a blueprint. And I know we discussed this idea of a blueprint of your life. That many people are familiar with this blueprint of our life that we experience from how our parents raised us, and like that. But I take it farther back, and many practitioners do, to even the moment you were conceived, and how that relationship between the parents and what that was like, what emotional qualities that had, really influences our DNA. And then the emotional environment and physical environment, everything during our gestation is influencing how our DNA and how our physical body and our emotional body is developing. So if the mother is under stress and not having the support that she needs throughout the pregnancy, that sets up a blueprint of stress and not receiving support for the child, because that's the child is modeling its, we model our development, our DNA models our development off of the emotional environment that our mother is in. And so then when we're born, that's usually continuing. And if how old was your son when you left?
He would have been almost 7.
So he had that first 7 years of his life and that whole gestational birth journey in that same milieu. And it sounds like what you were saying is that his father had trauma growing up that he had never healed from. And this is one thing that people are becoming more and more aware of how we keep passing that trauma down through the generations if we don't really pay attention to it. And unfortunately, many people deny, like they use denial. And I don't know if this is true for your husband, but this is just what for your ex. I'm assuming you were married. Yeah. But you just didn't use those terms, so just call him what you want me to call him. So what many people do is like, oh, that's the past, and I have this experience in my family. I mean, my grandmother is in her 80s and she's suffering the consequences of a life of denial that those past experiences were influencing her in any way. That's the past. Let's put it behind us. Let's move on with life. I don't have time for this emotional processing or any kind of healing around that. It's not affecting me. And yet it does. And it's like at a certain point, you can't keep the lid on anymore. You put it in the trash can and it's in there festering, and those and what we're learning about trauma, especially early childhood trauma, is that it stays with us and we carry it. And even going to years of talking therapy has proven to be an incomplete healing process for people, because it's just activating one aspect of the brain, and it's not it doesn't necessarily, unless it becomes a more somatically oriented therapy, which means it's involving the whole body and where the trauma is residing in the body and helping the nervous system to deregulate from fight and flight mode all the time back to rest and digest, which that's what happens is we get stuck in fight and flight mode, especially if we had that trauma already in utero. Our whole nervous system is designed to orient towards being in fight and flight mode all the time because it's not safe. And so I'm loving hearing how homeopathy can be a holistic somatic therapy, because I imagine even just having somebody listen to all the different ways that you might feel, or having you, his mom, listen to your son about all the different ways, or your daughter about all the different ways that they might feel, and then be able to give them something that helps them feel better is very powerful. I've been exploring homeopathy more myself, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about your experience of, how did it address those traumas? I know it's not an instant healing. And you said something about whatever needs to go can clear out. I would love for you to share in more detail, perhaps with a story of an experience you've had where there was something in you that needed to come out, and how the homeopathy helped it to come out.
It was a lot of healing. I don't remember the specific medicines, but I remember one of them I started talking, and it was very emotional, and I was crying and crying and crying. And she said, this is where you are. She tested my energy to see if the medicine, which is again placing against the solar plexus, to see if the medicine works with you, because your body will tell you whether or not you need the medicine or you don't, right? So she would pick a handful, and it helped release the anger I had towards my family, my mom and dad, towards certain things that happened to me as a child. And so we had to heal that. And then once we healed that, then she said, now we can start to move on to the emotional abuse you received because you had such traumatic childbirths with both of your children. And so there was tinctures and homeopathic medicine to make me feel more at peace, not so stressed, not freak out at everything, and be able to make it through a day and not feel so angry at everybody, which was what I was afraid would happen, was I would take all that anger and put it on my children, and I didn't want to do that. So my main goal was to heal myself first, and that was very emotional. It was a lot of crying, a lot of taking the medicines, and it was a slow progression as we sort of healed, like an onion. You heal one layer, now you've got to heal the next layer. And it was healing, you know, not only even physically, like I started to lose weight because I put all this weight on because, you know, it was sort of protecting myself. And so it was a matter of the weight started to come off as I started to feel better. I was able to sleep at night. The pains in my feet stopped. I no longer had pain in my feet and tingling when I would get up in the morning, because I was always in, like you said before, that fear and flight mode. I was always, what's going to happen now? Am I going to have to deal with this? So it was like just slowly sort of healing me. And then in respect, as I said, I started to work with my son, and his was, like I said, a lot of anger. So it was dealing with the anger, and he would have a lot of rashes that would break out, and through that he slowly started to release, and we did a lot of other therapies as well, but the homeopathy, I think, helped us in a very huge way release a lot of anger, because when you store all that in the emotional body, it becomes a physical. For me, it was my feet, and for my son, it was his skin. It was starting to, you know, so healing those was, I think, the most important thing, was healing those emotions and releasing them so that they're no longer part of that anger and frustration. So
how did it get released then? Because I understand that, like, the feet being painful because there's anger in there and it can't get out. I'm imagining that the homeopathic medicine helped to open up those channels so that it could release, so it wasn't irritating your nerves. And the same with the skin, with your son's skin, that inflammation anywhere is often associated with anger that's stuck in the body and that's inflaming the tissues. And that if we find another way to release that anger, then it doesn't have to get all inflamed in the skin. So I'm curious if the homeopathic medicine just helped the release to happen more easily, so that it wasn't inflaming your nerves in your feet and in your son's skin, or if there was also other therapies that helped you to release the anger in other ways in conjunction with the homeopathics, so that this inflammation didn't have to continue.
Usually with homeopathic, depending on what the ailment is, usually when you start taking the homeopathic medicine, it'll get worse before it gets better. So it's like the body has to push it out. So it pushes it out, and more than likely it'll come out in a physical form. So as I said before, for my son, it was his skin, and for my feet, and for me, it was the feet. So the body will push everything out of the body, and so it'll heighten. So it'll get worse for maybe a week or two or a couple of days, and then you'll slowly start to feel less and less and less and less and less. She did also encourage meditation and yoga at the same time to support me to help balance my energies as well. She really encouraged that, because she said, as much as the homeopathic can heal all these things, if you're not bringing practices into your life that are going to help you balance your emotions, then it's a little bit fruitless, because you're just going to be back here in a couple of months asking for the same medicines again, because you're not doing anything to help balance you. So bringing yoga, bringing meditation into my life, sharing it with my children, to say, look, this is how you can do it. It's very easy. Also help them. Eating healthy. I was always a big person also on eating. And so eating as clean and as fresh as possible, things that weren't full of antibiotics and steroids. I switched all of our food over to as clean as I could, because she said, I remember her saying to me, your body can fight off some of the pesticides that are in some of the vegetables, but it can't deal with the hormones and the steroids in the meats and the fish. So those you want to make sure they're as clean as possible, because they affect your body again. And then you'll be back here again. We'll be trying to help deal with that. So it wasn't just one. It was kind of like, start with the medicine, heal, but then also bring other things in to assist you in that and keep you in that nice balanced state. So.
And now you were sharing with me before we started that you've developed some healing programs that you actually offer to support other people, and having to do with the breathing and the voice, and sort of working with this blueprint that we all got from our childhood and clearing some of those patterns. Can you share a little bit about that and how that developed and what that's about?
Sure. So it's a subconscious release technique, and it actually deals with the emotional code. So as children, we are blueprinted, as we spoke, by traumas, situations, social media, cultural influences, and we take that into our adulthood. And our body is very smart. It finds something that we've had a traumatic experience with, and it connects a emotion to it. And then when you come to something very similar, the body instantly releases that emotion chemical into the body, and you react the same way. And then you're wondering why you have fear or anxiety or confusion around something, but it's brand new. It's because it's relatable, and the brain feels the same trauma or feels the same confusion, so it releases the chemical. With the process, which is it's an energy clearing, is I let people tell me what's going on, what's challenging them in their life at this time. And through speaking, they usually spit out their programs, as I like to say. They start talking about what's not working in their life, what they're angry about. And then I will usually come into their energy. We can do this over Zoom, we can do it in person, with their permission, of course. And I will test their energy against emotions. And that way we will start to clear their emotions by them saying and clearing the programs. And that can take anywhere from 45 minutes up to an hour. Sometimes we go much deeper into childhood solutions, because sometimes something will start as children, and then it'll come out as an adult. And the two are not even related in a sense, but they are, because it's the same emotion. Mm-hmm. And so once we clear that one that's in the childhood, they're able to release it, and they start to feel in their body so much lighter. It's like they've kind of just taken suitcases of crap and just dumped them to the side.
Yeah.
And starting to move on.
Was this a technique that you experienced that you found a practitioner to help you with during your healing process, and then you decided it was so effective that you wanted to learn it and offer it to others?
Yes, that's sort of what happened. I had built a program in my business called Discover Your Blueprint, which is showing you how to understand and recognize programs that don't serve you. But I felt there was a piece missing. And when I discovered this piece through trying it myself, I thought this sort of closes the book on the whole program, because it gives you the tools and to go through the program, but then at the end it shows you how we can clear this. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I will just offer a simple clearing, and we'll spend 30 minutes and it'll just clear out programs, because we take them on even today. You'll be in a situation and suddenly you've taken on that person's program and you go home wondering why do I feel this way, because you've let that affect you. And so I applied it to myself and thought this will be wonderful. And you know what, ultimately my goal is to make everybody's negative energy smaller and their positive energy bigger, and to be able to move through life and feel better in what they're doing. So
yeah, it sounds like very womb-centered work, even if you're not calling it so. Like I told you before, I was practicing all kinds of womb-centered healing approaches before I realized that that's where that was coming from. So I just want to acknowledge you for following that inner wisdom of knowing, oh, this is what I need to complete my own personal healing, and then to be able to share this with others, because clearing some of these trauma-based emotion patterns and emotional response habits is such an important thing, and resetting to life-affirming, life-generating, and wise emotional patterns. So I'm curious if this program helps to reset the system in some way. Like, it's one thing to clear out the unhealthy emotional patterns, and then I kind of feel like we have a natural intrinsic setting of wisdom and clarity and all of the things that help us to feel good, and I'm just curious how you hold space for that resetting.
Well, once we clear the programs around that issue are gone, because it's through breath work, it's the breathing in and releasing the programs. I also offer them certain things to start to recognize and move forward with journaling, because when we journal, as I'm sure you know, you start to spill out things that don't work within your life and problems that are coming up. And a lot of times when we pay attention to that, we're able to clear that and then start to reset ourselves to go in a different trajectory, so that we're aligned more in a positive way, as opposed to keep falling back to what we feel comfortable, and helping them understand that change is very difficult for some people, because it means doing something that's a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit different. But once you clear out some of that, they're able to sort of move forward and reset themselves. So I hope that sort of explains it a little bit.
Yeah, well, and that's similar to some of the work I do with the journaling, is to support people to find their own reset, like find their own inner guidance and wisdom,
Right.
Which I feel ultimately we all need to do, even if we're enlisting support people to help us see more clearly, or do a big piece of work of clearing out some patterns that we're kind of blind to or overcome by, right? And so we get that help, and then I'm glad to hear that you're then supporting people to find, then orient to their own inner guidance with the journaling and perhaps other practices that that help us to connect with what feels good and right and healthy from our own inner guidance. That's really beautiful. Unfortunately, a lot of practices try to get people to fit into a set of ways of being and ways of thinking and ways of seeing things that might be really good to try on for a while, but then that can be limiting to how we develop our own inner wisdom if we're relying on this externally produced structure all the time. And so it's good to hear that it's through these types of practices of journaling, getting in touch with your own inner voice of wisdom, that I feel that completion of the healing process can take place. Otherwise, we're just dependent on whoever created that external process to, keep sort of making us fit into it. And we all need something a little bit different, I feel. So having a framework that allows each person to find their own way to a certain degree is really helpful.
Yeah.
So wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you so much for sharing with us about your healing process and how, you know, you've recovered your life from these blueprints. You know, it sounds like perhaps there were some aspects of your blueprint that made it okay for you to be in that marriage and to have children in the first place. And then, hold on one second here.
Okay.
So yes, thank you so much for joining us and sharing about your journey. If folks wanted to get in touch with you and learn more about your work, how could they find you?
So they can find me through my website, which is rootedforsuccess.com, or they can find me through Instagram at rootedforsuccess, or they can reach out through Facebook, Raschell Harlingten, or Rooted for Success, my page as well. So a couple different ways.
Right. Well, I love this name, Rooted for Success. We often talk about in womb-centered healing the rootedness and the womb being in the root of our being. And so, see, pretty soon you're going to be out there wearing red scarves and talking like a priestess. All right. Well, thanks again. And listeners know that you can always find out more about the Womb Centered Healing Temple by going to wombcenteredhealing.com and learning about the programs that are shared there. The Biomystical Womb Apprenticeship Program. We just started the Herbal Womb Wellness Program today. And you can also learn about reach out to me if you're interested in the Biomystical Womb Oracle Card Deck and book that we have a crowdfunding campaign going on right now. So lots of different things to learn more about if you want to reach out and connect. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And many blessings. That's all for now.